So open source works better than closed source. This is Ubuntu machine. 10 seconds, we're all ready to go, right? Up yours, Mac. Anyway, I want to talk about a couple of things here about open source. So previous speakers were talking about a lot about open source and heroes in open source and how we make everybody's lives better and all that stuff. And the other topic I want to chat about a little bit, which is more relevant for today's big data event, is about data availability and what you're going to do if your data disappear. Right? Anyway, I've been around a little for a few years. I've been with Hadoop development team at Yahoo since 2009, and before that I was doing cluster development at some microsystems for 15 years. And I was in Linux desktop for actually almost 20 years now, so I love open source. It works if you know how. So at any rate, I want to chat about this peaceful evolution in open source, right? And a lot of my colleagues are usually saying like, hey, open source is a goddamn anarchy, and nobody's listening to anyone, and everything is actually totally chaotic and all. In reality, anarchy is actually the absence of the rulers, which is what the open source is. So the open source is actually meritocracy, if you will, right? So we don't have leaders and we don't have people who tell you what to do because they told you so. We have people actually that show you how to do stuff, and you follow or you find your own way. And I think it's great because this is exactly how evolution works. This is exactly how these little cells and amoebas and bacteria actually were contemplating the whole design of the human being for a billion years or what's not. And anyway, and we have actually the whole lot of interesting things happening in open source. We have a bunch of different licenses you can choose and pick from, and donate your software to the world under. You want to make sure that everybody is actually, contributing and publishing. You do GPL. You want to make sure that your stuff is out and everybody is free to use it. You do ASL, and so on and so on. And if you think about this, GPL is actually very interesting because, say, Google became what it became just because of the open source. It's Linux shop. I mean, the servers they use and it's all Linux, and like 20 years ago, just imagine Google is trying to run on Microsoft NT, right? Just think about this for a moment. So anyway, being evolutionary, we in open source we actually non-aggressive, right? So that particular presentation didn't harm any commercial vendor at all. So I didn't use a byte of commercial software, right? Totally open. And think about the spectrum of the open source solutions, right? I mean, operating systems, cloud computing, communications, security, Bitcoin, data storage, music, whatever, right? I mean, name it and it's there. And one of the direct results of it, of course, is the fact that open source is actually making the world a better place. Like, who remembers Microsoft now? Or like BlackBerry, right? Or I don't know. So Android recently just turned over 51% of the market share. So they're never gonna double again, right? So iOS is probably gonna be the thing of the past soon. Right? I don't know. I just like to pick up on these guys. Anyway, as been mentioned before, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, the software that's coming out from the open source community is not usually easy to use, right? I mean, users need simplicity, they need to have guarantees on the data preservation and consistency. By the way, consistency, speaking of consistency, Mt. Gox and MongoDB. Anyone heard the story? How Mt. Gox went down because of the MongoDB and consistency problems? Anyway, so, and of course users want high availability of their systems, and users want this and that. And I think open source doesn't deliver that always, And I like to believe that we don't do this because we sort of trying to keep our job security. And like Jonathan was talking about, like vendors are going to sell you off-the-shelf product which gonna solve all your problems. Well, hell no, actually. We're gonna make sure that it's not that easy, right? So you need Hadoop developers, you need HBase developers, and you're gonna pay premium for them, right? Anyway, but what FOSS is good at is essentially moving forward very fast in order to deliver and solve the interesting problems, right? So, and the reason for that is that we don't run marketing researches, we don't do, you know, analysis of the user demands and that kind of stuff. People are coming to open source with the problems, and oftentimes they solve it actually. Oh, by the way, how many of you have contributed to open source ever? Okay, there's some room to improve. Okay. Anyway, and if you think about this, right, the open source moves incredibly fast. I mean, like, just take a look at Hadoop, for instance, right? Hadoop 1, which was de facto the Hadoop platform for many, many years, in the last 2 years, it did like 10 plus releases, right? So it's pretty much what, release every quarter, even faster than that, right? Every 2 months, literally. Hadoop 2 that was actually being developed in parallel had 12, maybe actually 13 releases in the same two years. I mean, it's actually very, 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 very fast. So we finding the problems, we developing new features, we contribute the code, and those heroes just sitting there in their dark corners and just cranking out the releases that everybody can use. By the way, in the open source space, in the Hadoop space, about 51% of the Hadoop users are actually using Apache Software Foundation Hadoop of the Apache website, right? So that's pretty cool, I guess. Of course, what we cranking out there comes with the cost of high complexity. I mean, it's incredibly sophisticated ecosystem, right? Typical Hadoop release has 16, 17, 18, sometimes more components in it. I mean, in Big Top, I will talk about this Big Top a little bit in a second. We build the open source Apache stack, and we have actually, I believe, 19 components right now. So that whenever the release is coming, you can just install the packages and have that stuff on your computer, on your data center. But it's actually very, very hard to build. So just consider this. This is my favorite feature. So it doesn't even include Hadoops before 018, right? I call it alpha genealogy tree. So don't even try to actually read it. It's impossible. But I have open source Hadoop. I have MapR, Cloudera, Hortonworks in there, and it's actually like nuts. So, and if you think about this, today Hadoop is actually much more than just MapReduce. It's again HBase and memory databases, these, that, caching solutions, Spark is coming along, visualization frameworks, Accumula, whatever, right? So there's a bunch of stuff, and it's not getting simpler to integrate them all together. So basically, poor fellow. Anyway, so just to give you a taste of it, so this is just Hadoop 2 part of the world, right? So this is a much simpler, smaller part of the diagram I just showed before. And you can see is actually there's quite a bit of the intricate connections between different releases of the Hadoop that are going into different releases of the commercial software and this and that, and it's actually takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of insight to understand what's going on. Hence, again, job security for us, power, anyway. So, unfortunately, there's a Big Top that helps you to solve the complexity, or at least partial complexity. So what we do in Big Top, essentially, we allow to define a stack, run a build, reduce packages, deploy the cluster, install the integration test, make sure that everything works with each other. Awesome, great, you don't like something, you just rinse and repeat and just keep going, chugging along. So that kind of stuff. So now, the interesting part, we were talking about the HA all the time here, right? The big data all the time, which is a misnomer in my own opinion, but However, in order to use these alleged big data, it needs to be available, right? It needs to be available constantly for some of the users, less constantly for others, but it has to be available. So now imagine you have these, I don't know, hundreds terabytes of stuff in your cluster, and all of a sudden your name node dies. Boom. So back in the Hadoop days, the recovery would take probably 30 minutes, which was acceptable for some, not acceptable for others. Now in Hadoop 2 days, there is much better HA that is using Zookeeper quorum and allows you to actually have automatic failover and all that kind of awesome things. So, however, there are a couple of problems with the solution. So you need to be able to, in some cases, fence the failing name node, because otherwise you might face the split brain problem, and it's not always the automatic procedure. It's still not 100% guarantees. And by the way, strong consistency about, what about it? We just, mount box, So, and if you're curious about why 5 nines are not enough, we had this conversation recently with one of the banks that said, if our cluster goes down for a minute, it costs us $75 million. So 5 nines give you about, what, 5.5 minutes a year downtime? Do the math. So what's an alternative for that? And alternative is very interesting. So instead of trying to solve or mitigate the issue, you instead need to find a way to prevent it, right? And the way to prevent it is essentially has been known for about 25 years, and it's called consensus-based duplication. So you have distributed state machine that has multiple nodes, and each node actually has its own copy of the data. And when you run an operation, you coordinate the operation first, and then the operation is applied to each copy of the state machine independently. So what it gives is the situation where you have multiple active masters, right? Active systems. So one active master dies, client falls over to another one, and because the picture of the universe is the same, nobody cares, right? You just keep moving forward. The work is actually happening in open source. There's a couple of JIRAs for those of you who want to contribute and better your karma, sort of. What it gives you, and why I was trying to bring it up is, we all sort of excited and carried away about the opportunities in big data and stuff like this, but it's almost natural to keep forgetting that availability sometimes means more than what you can do with the data, because if there is no data, you cannot do anything basically. And I don't know, it's probably not the vendor speech, but the company you're working for is actually doing this cool stuff and replication technology. So if you want to stop by, we'll be at the booth. We can talk separately on the technical matters. At any rate, thank you guys for being here. It's awesome. Appreciate the audience.